Victor fired employee Solange when she was pregnant, but she returned to court with triplets and a surprise. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. In the imposing Hale Mansion in Westchester County, the December morning carried a biting cold that infiltrated through the Art Deco stained glass windows and froze even the heated interior of the property. Solange Barrett, a 24-year-old Brazilian immigrant, adjusted her navy blue uniform as she meticulously cleaned the crystal ornaments in the main living room. Her movements were slower than usual, the fatigue of a 5-month pregnancy beginning to weigh on her, though she struggled to hide the small protrusion beneath her loose-fitting uniform. Victor Hale, 38, CEO of Hale Enterprises and heir to one of New York's largest fortunes, observed her from the doorway with cold eyes. Tall, with perfectly trimmed brown hair and an impeccable Armani suit, he was the embodiment of American corporate power. "We need to talk, Solange." His voice cut through the silence with the precision of a scalpel. Their relationship had begun 8 months earlier, when Victor, after his divorce, found in Solange something he had never admitted needing: someone who listened without judgment. What started with late-night conversations in the mansion's kitchen while she finished her shift transformed into secret encounters in his quarters. Victor had always made it clear that it was temporary, a convenient arrangement between a powerful man and an employee who, in his own words, should feel grateful for the attention. In the mahogany and leather office, Victor wasted no time with niceties. "The housekeeper informed me about your condition." Solange nodded, gathering courage for the conversation she had been rehearsing for weeks. "Yes, I'm 5 months pregnant. They're your children, Victor." "Children?" Victor's eyebrow arched. The doctor confirmed they're triplets. A heavy silence filled the room before a dry laugh escaped Victor's throat. "And you expect me to believe that? That you, a domestic worker without proper documentation who barely completed high school in Brazil, are carrying my heirs?" The words hit Solange like slaps. "I can take a paternity test. I know they're yours. There's been no one else." Victor stood up, circling the desk to face her directly. "You don't understand your position, do you? I'm CEO of a company valued in billions. I'm about to close a deal with Japanese investors that will transform Hale Enterprises into the largest corporation in the sector. My ex-wife, from a traditional family with a Dartmouth education, wasn't enough for me. What makes you think you would be?" Solange remained firm, though her eyes watered. "I'm not asking you to marry me. I just thought you should know about your children." "My children?" Victor laughed again, louder this time. "Children of a Brazilian cleaning lady with no qualifications, no education, nothing to offer but a womb? 9, Solange. These are not my children." He opened a drawer, took out a checkbook, and filled in an amount with deliberately slow movements. $15,000. More than you would earn in an entire year here. Use it to solve your problem, or go back to Brazil. Frankly, I don't care. When Solange didn't take the check, Victor tossed it onto the desk. "You're fired, effective immediately. Martha has already prepared your belongings. You have 1 hour to leave my property." "Victor, please." Solange finally let the tears fall. "I've worked here for 4 years. Your mother trusts me to handle her antiques. You can't just—" "I can and I will," he interrupted, pressing a button on the intercom. "Security to my office, please." When 2 uniformed men appeared at the door, Victor declared in a clear voice, loud enough for all staff in the hallway to hear, "Escort Miss Barrett out. She is no longer welcome on this property." As they gently but firmly dragged her through the mansion's corridor, Victor followed them to the main door. The moment Solange stepped into the snow outside, carrying only a hastily packed suitcase prepared by another maid, he added, "Women like you are replaceable, Solange. Dozens would accept this job without bringing their personal problems to my property. You're nothing but a worthless immigrant, uneducated and now with bastards in your womb. Go back to the hole you came from." The Hale mansion door closed with a final slam, leaving Solange alone in the beginning snowstorm, without a car, without immediate prospects, and with only $212 in her bank account. The following months were a nightmare of survival. Without references from her last employment, Solange managed to secure only temporary jobs. Waitress during the day, cashier at night, always hiding her increasingly prominent belly until it became impossible. She slept in a rented room in the Bronx, sharing space with 3 other women, all immigrants like her. When she was fired from her last job because she could no longer stand for hours, Solange hit rock bottom. Sitting on a frozen park bench in Central Park, she contemplated the towers of Manhattan buildings shining against the gray sky, including the imposing Hale building. It was at that moment, with the babies moving inside her, that Solange Barrett made a promise to herself and her unborn children. She took Victor's crumpled check from her pocket, the one she had never cashed. "I don't need your money," she whispered, tearing the check into tiny pieces that flew away with the icy wind. "One day, you'll look at me and regret everything, not because I'll seek revenge, but because I'll prove you were wrong. About everything." The next morning, Solange knocked on the door of Eleanor Hale, Victor's mother, who lived separately in an elegant Upper East Side apartment. The 68-year-old matriarch, known for her philanthropy and for being one of the first women to graduate from Yale, listened to the complete story. In her blue eyes, the same ones Victor had inherited, there was no judgment, only a profound sadness. "My son has always been cruel when he feels threatened," Eleanor finally said. "I'll help you, Solange, not out of pity, but because I believe in you, and because these children are my grandchildren, regardless of what Victor thinks." With Eleanor's discreet help, Solange secured a small apartment and proper medical care. When the triplets were born, 2 boys and a girl, all with the unmistakable blue eyes of the Hales, Eleanor was present, silently crying as she held the babies. "They have our family's eyes," murmured the elderly lady. "Victor can deny it all he wants, but Hale blood runs in these children." It was Eleanor who suggested that Solange return to school. "You have a brilliant mind that my son was too foolish to recognize," said the matriarch. "Use it." In the following weeks, as Solange cared for the newborns with Eleanor's help, she began to formulate a plan. Not for revenge, but for a future that would ensure her children would never face the humiliation she had endured. Each night, after putting the triplets to sleep, she would study for her GED, determined to complete the education that had been interrupted when she left Brazil at 17. "I'll build something they can be proud of," she whispered to the sleeping infants, "and one day the man who discarded us will see exactly what he threw away." Eleanor watched from the doorway, nodding silently. "He will indeed, and that day will come sooner than he thinks." As Solange looked at the sleeping triplets, she couldn't possibly imagine that 15 years later she would be signing acquisition documents for parts of the empire Victor had built, nor that their paths would cross again on a night that would change everything. The first rays of dawn crept through the thin curtains of Solange's tiny Bronx apartment as she cradled Gabriel in one arm while attempting to warm a bottle with the other. Sophia and Miguel were miraculously still asleep in the second-hand crib they all shared, their tiny bodies curled together for warmth in the poorly heated room. The apartment, if it could be called that, was a single room with a kitchenette and bathroom shared with 3 other immigrant families on the same floor. "Shh, meu amor," she whispered as Gabriel's cries threatened to wake his siblings. The dark circles under her eyes spoke of nights without proper sleep, days without proper rest. At 24, Solange felt decades older, the weight of single motherhood to 3 infants crushing down on her slender frame. A soft knock at the door startled her. Opening it carefully, she found Eleanor Hale standing there, elegant even at this early hour, holding several bags from upscale baby boutiques. "I thought you might need these," the older woman said, stepping inside and immediately assessing the Spartan conditions. "Oh, Solange, it's temporary," Solange replied with forced brightness, bouncing Gabriel gently. I have an interview today for a waitressing position at Rosie's Diner. They said I can work the morning shift. Eleanor placed the bags down and took Gabriel expertly into her arms. And the babies? Mrs. Fernandez from downstairs. She has grandchildren in Mexico. She said she can watch them for a few dollars an hour. Solange's voice betrayed her uncertainty. Every dollar spent on childcare was one less for formula and diapers. And what will you tell the diner about your experience? Solange's expression hardened with determination. I have 3 babies at home. I'll do anything, any shift they have. I can't afford pride right now. 3 hours later, Solange stood in Rosie's Diner, hands clasped nervously as the manager, a heavy-set man with permanent sweat stains under his arms, looked her up and down with skepticism. Waitressing experience? 2 years at a cafe in São Paulo, she lied, praying he wouldn't ask for references. Hours are 6 to 2, 6 days a week. Tips are split with the kitchen. You start tomorrow. He didn't ask about her family situation, and she didn't volunteer the information. That evening, as Solange rode the crowded subway back to the Bronx, she pulled out a tattered GED preparation book. Between stops, she forced herself to focus on algebra problems, her eyelids heavy with exhaustion. A woman beside her noticed. Studying? She asked kindly. I need to finish high school, Solange replied, unconsciously placing a protective hand over her still swollen abdomen. For my children. The following weeks established a brutal routine. Solange would wake at 4 in the morning, prepare bottles for Mrs. Fernandez, drop the triplets off at 5:30, work until 2, pick up the babies, study during their afternoon nap, then work on practical English exercises while feeding them in the evening. One particularly difficult morning, Solange accidentally spilled coffee on a customer's expensive suit. The man jumped up, cursing loudly. What kind of incompetent idiot are you? He shouted, drawing the attention of everyone in the diner. The manager emerged from the kitchen, his face flushed with anger. Barrett! Office now. Standing in the cramped back office, Solange fought back tears as the manager threatened termination. One more mistake like that, and you're done. Those suits cost more than you make in a month. Please, she whispered, dignity crumbling in the face of desperation. I have 3 babies at home. I'll be more careful. That night, while the triplets slept soundly for once, Solange stood at her apartment window, gazing at the distant glow of Manhattan. Somewhere in that skyline stood the Hale building, where Victor was probably working late, unaware or uncaring about the struggle of the woman who carried his children. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. Eleanor entered, carrying more supplies and a small envelope. How was your day? She asked, noticing Solange's reddened eyes immediately. I almost lost my job, Solange admitted, sinking onto the edge of her bed. And Mrs. Fernandez raised her rates. I don't know if I can... Eleanor pressed the envelope into her hands. Take it, please. Not from Victor, from me. Solange started to protest, but Eleanor held up a hand. Consider it an investment in my grandchildren's future. With Eleanor's discreet financial support, Solange was able to secure evening janitorial work at a corporate building just blocks from the Hale headquarters. The irony wasn't lost on her as she cleaned executive bathrooms that looked nearly identical to those she'd once cleaned in Victor's mansion. One night, while emptying trash bins on the 42nd floor, she paused at the window. The Hale building stood illuminated against the night sky, its logo a beacon of wealth and privilege. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine Victor working late in his office, completely unaware that the mother of his children was scrubbing toilets mere blocks away. One day, she whispered against the glass, one day you'll see us differently. A milestone came unexpectedly when Gabriel, at just 10 months old, clearly said his first word. Book. Solange had been reading to the triplets nightly, determined that language delays wouldn't be part of their already challenging start. "He said book!" she exclaimed to Eleanor during her next visit, tears of pride streaming down her face. And Sophia repeated it just hours later. Eleanor beamed with pride, watching the babies on their playmat. "They're exceptional, Solange, all three of them. You can see it already in how they observe everything, how quickly they learn." That night, watching the triplets sleep peacefully, Solange made them a silent promise. "You will have more, be more, than I ever was. This struggle is temporary, but your future is limitless." As months passed, Solange established a fragile stability. Mrs. Lopez, an elderly neighbor with insomnia, offered to watch the babies during Solange's night shifts in exchange for home-cooked Brazilian meals. With this arrangement, Solange could work more hours while continuing her GED studies during the day while the triplets napped. Then came the day that shattered her hard-won equilibrium. Carrying a tray of drinks at the upscale restaurant where she'd recently secured a better-paying waitress position, Solange froze in place. Seated at the corner table was Victor Hale, surrounded by Japanese businessmen looking exactly as she remembered. Powerful, assured, untouchable. Her hands began to tremble, coffee sloshing dangerously close to the cup's edges. A co-worker noticed her distress. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'll take another table," Solange whispered. "Please, I can't." But the manager appeared beside her. "Table 7 needs service now, Barrett. Those are important clients." With no choice, Solange approached Victor's table, keeping her eyes lowered as she distributed drinks. Victor was mid-sentence about quarterly projections, barely glancing at the waitstaff. For a moment, Solange thought she might escape unnoticed. Then his voice halted mid-word. From her peripheral vision, she saw his posture stiffen, his head turning slightly toward her. A flash of recognition crossed his features before his expression hardened and he deliberately turned away, continuing his conversation as if the interruption had never occurred. When the meal ended and the businessmen departed, Solange returned to clear the table. Victor had already left, but under his saucer, she found a $5 tip with a handwritten note. "For the Brazilian cleaning lady." In the employee bathroom, Solange finally allowed herself to break down, tears streaming down her face as she clutched the cruel note. Then, with deliberate movements, she folded it carefully and tucked it into her wallet. "One day, you will swallow these words," she whispered to her reflection. When she showed the note to Eleanor the following day, the older woman's face hardened with an anger Solange had never witnessed from her before. "My son will regret this," Eleanor said, her voice low and dangerous. "And I will ensure you have the means to show him just how wrong he was." The cruel note would be kept for 15 years, until the day Solange discreetly framed it in her office at the Barrett Innovation Solutions penthouse, next to the first patent that would change her life and begin building her empire. The note from Victor remained tucked in Solange's wallet for 3 years, a bitter reminder that fueled her determination on the hardest days. Now, at 27, she stood before the City College of New York administration building, the triplets, now 3 years old, clinging to her hands. Gabriel, always the leader, tugged impatiently. "Mama, go inside now?" he asked, his English already more fluent than hers had been when she first arrived in America. "Yes, mon amour. This is where Mama will study," Solange replied, taking a deep breath before walking through the doors. The financial aid office was crowded with students, but Solange had learned patience through necessity. When her turn came, she presented her paperwork meticulously organized in a folder Eleanor had given her. "Barrett Solange, GED completed last month applying for the environmental engineering program," she stated clearly, her accent still present but her confidence unwavering. The counselor reviewed her documents, eyebrows rising slightly. "Your entrance exam scores are quite impressive, Ms. Barrett, especially for someone who—" He paused, clearly recalibrating his words, "who completed a GED so recently." "Thank you," Solange replied simply, not mentioning the countless nights studying after the triplets were asleep or Eleanor's unwavering support that had made this moment possible. "There's a partial scholarship available. With your scores, you should qualify, but—" His eyes drifted to the triplets who were quietly arranging colored blocks in a corner of the office. "Your situation is complicated." Before Solange could respond, her phone rang. Checking the caller ID, she excused herself. "I need to take this. It's their grandmother." Outside in the hallway, Eleanor's voice came through clearly. "How did it go?" "They're considering me for a partial scholarship, but I can see the doubt. Single mother, 3 children, immigrant." "Check your email in 5 minutes," Eleanor replied cryptically before ending the call. When Solange returned to the counselor's office, he was staring at his computer screen with a changed expression. "Ms. Barrett, I've just received an email from Eleanor Hale, chairwoman of the City College Foundation Board. She's personally endorsed your application and supplemented your scholarship." He looked up, clearly reassessing the young woman before him. "You didn't mention you knew Mrs. Hale." Solange smiled slightly. She believes in education and second chances. 2 months later, Solange sat in the university library long after most students had gone home. The triplets slept in a modified stroller beside her desk, their peaceful breathing a counterpoint to the intensity with which she studied water filtration systems for her first major project. Professor Jenkins, passing through on his way home, paused at her table. "Still here, Barrett?" "It's nearly midnight." Solange looked up from her diagrams. "I had an idea about using locally sourced materials for filtration in developing regions. If I could modify the composition to—" The professor held up his hand, smiling. "Save it for tomorrow's class." "But—" He hesitated, looking at her work spread across the table. "This isn't just an academic exercise for you, is it?" Solange glanced at her sleeping children. "Clean water shouldn't be a luxury, Professor. Too many children die from preventable waterborne diseases." "Your perspective is refreshing," he admitted. "Most students see this as theoretical." "Nothing is theoretical when you've seen real need," she replied quietly. Over the following weeks, Solange's project evolved from a class assignment into something more substantial. She experimented in her small apartment kitchen, testing different combinations of sand, charcoal, and clay composites, measuring filtration rates and contamination levels with equipment borrowed from the university lab. The triplets, curious and precocious, became her eager assistants. Sophia, with her analytical mind, would watch the water drip through different filters and count the seconds. Gabriel organized the materials meticulously, while Miguel drew colorful pictures of Mama's water machine. One evening, as Solange tested yet another composition, a knock came at her door. Eleanor entered, followed by a distinguished-looking elderly man in an expensive suit that seemed out of place in the modest Bronx apartment. "Solange, this is Martin Goldstein," Eleanor introduced. "The investor I mentioned." Martin Goldstein surveyed the apartment with undisguised curiosity, his gaze lingering on the makeshift laboratory set up on the kitchen table before shifting to the triplets, who stared back with equal interest. "Mrs. Hale speaks very highly of you," he said finally. "She claims you've developed something revolutionary." Solange straightened her posture, suddenly aware of her worn jeans and faded t-shirt. "It's still in development, Mr. Goldstein. But yes, I believe the approach has significant potential." "Show me," he said simply, setting his briefcase on the floor. For the next hour, Solange explained her filtration system with growing confidence, demonstrating how the locally sourced materials removed contaminants more efficiently than existing low-cost options. Throughout her presentation, the triplets chimed in with surprising clarity. "See, the bad things stick here," Gabriel explained, pointing to the charcoal layer with the authority of a miniature professor. Sophia added, "It's faster than Mama's old filter. I counted." Martin's expression shifted from polite interest to genuine fascination, not just with the technology, but with the extraordinary children who understood concepts far beyond their years. "And what happens to the water after filtration?" he asked Sophia directly. "It's clean," the little girl replied. "No more bacterias and viruses. We can drink it." Martin turned to Solange with newfound respect. "You've created something truly innovative, Ms. Barrett, and your children are remarkable." He opened his briefcase and extracted a document. "I'm prepared to offer you $100,000 for development, in exchange for 30% equity in whatever company emerges from this technology." Solange's heart raced, but her face remained composed. Eleanor had prepared her for this moment, coaching her on valuation and negotiation. "That's generous, Mr. Goldstein, but I'd prefer $70,000 for 15%. I need to maintain majority control." Martin's eyebrows rose, then he laughed appreciatively. "You have business instincts beyond engineering, I see." "I have 3 children to consider," Solange replied simply. "Their future depends on the decisions I make today." After Martin left with a signed preliminary agreement, Eleanor embraced Solange tightly. "You were magnificent. He doesn't invest in technologies, he invests in people, and he sees in you what I saw 3 years ago." The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. With the initial funding, Solange rented a small workspace, purchased proper testing equipment, and hired a part-time assistant to help refine the prototype. Her kitchen table became a desk covered with patent applications and business formation documents. The triplets watched this transformation with curiosity, somehow understanding that their lives were changing. One evening, as Solange worked late on technical drawings, Gabriel climbed onto her lap. "Mama, are we rich now?" he asked innocently. Solange smiled, kissing his forehead. "No, meu amor, but we're building something important, something that will help many people." 3 months later, Solange stood in her newly established office space, holding the official patent document in trembling hands. Her name, printed clearly as the inventor, blurred through her tears. Eleanor stood beside her, while the triplets signed their names with colorful markers on a congratulatory banner they had made. "A toast," Eleanor declared, pouring grape juice into plastic cups, "to Barrett Water Solutions and its brilliant founder." As they clinked their makeshift glasses, Solange felt a surging confidence unlike anything she had experienced before. This patent, this piece of paper acknowledging her intellect and innovation, was the first tangible proof that Victor had been wrong about everything. "This is just the beginning," Eleanor said softly, echoing Solange's thoughts. "Victor has no idea what he's lost." That night, after tucking the triplets into their beds, proper beds in their own room, a luxury the initial investment had finally made possible, Solange placed the framed patent on her nightstand. The small patent that was born in the kitchen of a Bronx apartment would be just the first of hundreds, creating the foundation of an empire that would one day stand just blocks from the Hale building, casting both a metaphorical and literal shadow over the man who had considered her worthless. The framed patent on Solange's nightstand became both a reminder and a promise as Barrett Water Solutions steadily grew over the next 2 years. Now, 5 years after Victor had cast her out into the snow, Solange stood before the mirrored wall of her modest office, adjusting the collar of her department store blazer. At 29, she had developed a poised confidence that belied her humble beginnings, though the dark circles under her eyes testified to the relentless schedule she maintained. Mother, student completing her degree, and now CEO of a promising startup. "Ms. Barrett, your 9 o'clock is here," announced her assistant, a recent engineering graduate who had chosen Barrett Water Solutions over more established firms, drawn by Solange's reputation for innovation. "Thank you, Lisa. And please, for the 100th time, it's Solange," she replied with a warm smile that few in the corporate world ever witnessed. The morning consisted of interviews for a senior engineering position. Candidate after candidate, all men, all with prestigious degrees, entered her office with the same expression. Barely concealed surprise followed by subtle recalibration as they realized the young Latina woman was indeed the CEO. not the assistant. "Your resume is impressive," Solange told the fourth candidate, a silver-haired man with an MIT doctorate. "But I'm curious why you'd leave Westinghouse for a startup like ours." The man shifted uncomfortably. "Well, I assumed I'd be meeting with your technical director. Is he available to discuss the more complex aspects of the position?" Solange smiled pleasantly, though her eyes hardened. "I hold the patents for our core technology, Dr. Peterson. The complex aspects are my design, but I understand if you'd prefer a more traditional corporate structure." By afternoon, Solange had hired none of them, instead making a note to expand their recruitment efforts to women and international candidates. "Find me engineers who've faced real water scarcity," she instructed Lisa, "not just studied it theoretically." 3 weeks later, Solange navigated the sprawling convention center in Chicago, her identification badge swinging from a lanyard as she pushed through crowds at the International Clean Technology Expo. Despite Barrett Water Solutions having one of the most innovative displays on the floor, she was repeatedly directed to secretarial registration or asked if she was a translator. "Excuse me," called a security guard as she attempted to enter the VIP reception. "That area is for company executives only." Solange produced her credentials without changing her expression. "I'm Solange Barrett, CEO of Barrett Water Solutions." The guard examined her badge with suspicion before reluctantly stepping aside. Inside, the pattern continued. Men in expensive suits brushed past her to network with each other. When she approached a group discussing desalination technology, conversation paused awkwardly. "Are you looking for someone?" asked one executive, his British accent clipped. "I was hoping to discuss potential applications for our filtration system in coastal regions," Solange replied evenly. "Perhaps you could have your boss contact my office," he suggested with a patronizing smile. "These technical matters can be quite complex." "I am the boss," Solange stated simply, "and I designed the system myself. Here's my card. When you're ready to discuss complex technical matters, I'll be at booth 4372. The man's face flushed as he read her card, but Solange had already turned away, mentally adding another tally to an invisible scoreboard she'd been keeping since her first day as CEO. The expo proved worthwhile despite the constant microaggressions. Barrett Water Solutions secured 2 domestic contracts and sparked interest from international agencies. On the final day, Solange received a message that changed everything. Representatives from the United Nations Water Development Program wanted to meet regarding potential implementation in crisis regions. "This could be transformative," Solange told Martin Goldstein via video call that evening from her hotel room. "Not just for the company, but for communities without clean water access." "It's a significant opportunity," Martin agreed cautiously. "But UN contracts involve political considerations. Prepare thoroughly." The meeting was scheduled for the following month at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Solange spent weeks preparing, working late into the night after the triplets, now 5 years old and increasingly independent, were asleep. Eleanor provided invaluable guidance on navigating international bureaucracy, while Martin connected her with previous UN contractors. On the morning of the presentation, Solange splurged on a taxi rather than her usual subway commute. Standing before the iconic UN building, she smoothed down her most professional outfit, a navy suit purchased on sale but tailored to fit perfectly. Inside her briefcase were comprehensive implementation plans for 3 different scales of water crisis intervention. The conference room overlooking the East River gradually filled with representatives from various UN agencies. Solange arranged her materials methodically, running through key points in her mind as she waited for the committee chair to begin. The door opened one last time, and Solange's heart stopped. Victor Hale strode in, impeccably dressed in a bespoke suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. He moved with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to controlling rooms, nodding to several committee members who clearly knew him. "Apologies for the delay," he announced smoothly. "Hale Enterprises is here as a sustainability consultant for the committee." It took him exactly 12 seconds to notice her. His stride faltered momentarily, eyes widening in recognition before his professional mask slipped back into place. If others noticed the brief lapse, they gave no indication. "Let's begin," announced the committee chair. "Ms. Barrett, please proceed with your presentation." For the next 40 minutes, Solange outlined her company's approach to water purification with clarity and expertise. She demonstrated cost analyses, implementation timelines, and maintenance protocols, answering technical questions with confidence. Throughout, she felt Victor's gaze boring into her, but never once met his eyes directly. During the coffee break, Solange stepped into the hallway for a moment of quiet. From around the corner, she heard Victor's voice. "I'm familiar with this applicant," he was saying in hushed tones. "Between us, I have concerns about her company's capacity to handle a project of this magnitude. Perhaps we should consider more established contractors." Solange retreated silently, her mind racing. Before she could formulate a response strategy, a young woman approached her. "Ms. Barrett, I'm Rebecca Chen, Junior Coordinator for the Water Development Program." She glanced around before continuing quietly. "Someone on the committee is attempting to undermine your proposal. Political maneuvering, I suspect." "Thank you for the warning," Solange replied, maintaining her composure through sheer will. "Would you happen to know on what grounds?" "Questions about scalability and maintenance in remote regions," Rebecca replied. "If you could address those concerns preemptively in tomorrow's final assessment, it might help." Solange returned to her hotel room that evening and systematically dismantled her entire presentation. The triplets were staying with Eleanor, allowing her to work through the night reorganizing data, strengthening her implementation strategy, and developing comprehensive responses to the exact concerns Victor had raised. The next morning, operating on 2 hours of sleep but fueled by determination, Solange delivered a masterclass in professional poise. Her revised presentation directly addressed maintenance protocols for remote regions, included testimonials from existing implementation sites, and featured detailed scalability models. When the question period began, Victor leaned forward. "I have serious concerns about the long-term viability of this approach in regions with minimal technical infrastructure," he stated, his tone suggesting genuine concern rather than personal animus. Solange met his gaze directly for the first time. "An excellent point, Mr. Hale. If you'll turn to Appendix C in your packets, you'll find our 3-tiered maintenance protocol specifically designed for regions with limited technical resources. We've already implemented this system successfully in rural Indonesia, with maintenance performed entirely by local community members after just 3 days of training." The committee members flipped to the referenced section, murmurs of approval spreading through the room. Victor's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as he realized she had anticipated and neutralized his objection. When the committee voted unanimously to approve Barrett Water Solutions for the pilot program, Solange maintained her professional demeanor. Only in the privacy of the elevator did she finally allow herself a moment of pure, unrestrained triumph. 1 month later, Solange led the triplets through their new apartment in Queens, still modest by New York standards, but with 3 bedrooms, large windows, and a small balcony overlooking a tree-lined street. "This is your room," she told Sophia, opening the door to a space with a proper desk and bookshelves. "And Gabriel, yours has the morning sun for your plants. Miguel, yours has the best wall space for your artwork." "Is this our forever home?" Miguel asked, his artistic nature always seeking permanence. "It's our home for now," Solange replied, gathering them in a hug. "It's just the beginning, my loves. One day, we'll have a view of the entire city." As the triplets raced happily through the rooms of their new apartment, Solange didn't know that in just 3 years she would be declining a $100 million offer for Barrett Water Solutions, nor that the man making the offer would be a secret emissary of Victor Hale. 3 years passed like a whirlwind of calculated decisions and strategic growth. The Barrett Water Solutions headquarters now occupied 3 floors of a respectable office building in Manhattan's financial district. Inside her corner office, Solange gazed out at the skyline, the distant silhouette of the Hale building visible against the afternoon sky. At 32, she bore little resemblance to the frightened pregnant maid who had once cleaned crystal ornaments with trembling hands. Today, she wore a tailored Donna Karan suit, her once wild curls tamed into a sophisticated bob that framed her face elegantly. "Ms. Barrett, the Tokyo conference call is ready in the main boardroom," her executive assistant announced. "Thank you, James. I'll be right there." Solange gathered her tablet and presentation materials, pausing briefly to straighten the framed photo of the triplets on her desk. 8 years old now and thriving in ways that sometimes took her breath away. The boardroom hummed with anticipation as senior executives took their places around the polished mahogany table. Solange moved to the head position with the natural authority she had cultivated over years of forcing herself into rooms where others believed she didn't belong. "Good evening, Tokyo," she greeted in flawless Japanese, a language she had studied relentlessly over the past year to facilitate this very partnership. The executives on screen visibly straightened, impressed by the unexpected courtesy. For the next hour, Solange led the discussion on implementing Barrett purification systems across 17 Japanese municipalities. Her presentation was meticulous, her responses to technical questions confident and precise. When the call ended with enthusiastic agreement from the Japanese consortium, the room erupted in congratulations. "That's $140 million in contracts over 5 years, her CFO announced, his eyes wide with disbelief. Barrett Water Solutions has officially gone global. That evening, Solange's car service dropped her at Eleanor's Upper East Side apartment, where the triplets spent Thursday afternoons engaged in various enrichment activities with their grandmother. As she entered, the sound of classical piano floated through the spacious rooms, Miguel practicing Chopin with remarkable precision for an 8-year-old. "Mama!" Sophia called out, rushing from the dining room table covered with advanced mathematical textbooks. "I solved the differential equation Professor Kim sent. He says I'm ready for calculus." Gabriel appeared from Eleanor's home office, clutching printouts of stock market reports. "The investment portfolio I simulated last month would have yielded 14% returns," he announced proudly, "much better than the S&P average." Solange embraced each child, marveling at their distinct talents. Where other parents pushed their children toward conventional success, she had always encouraged their natural inclinations. Sophia's mathematical genius, Gabriel's financial acumen, and Miguel's artistic sensibilities were flourishing under this approach. Eleanor emerged from the kitchen, her elegant posture belying her 76 years. "They're extraordinary," she said softly, "each in their own way." Later, over dinner prepared by Eleanor's housekeeper, Solange shared news of the Japanese contracts. "We'll be expanding again. I'm thinking of renaming the company to reflect our broader focus." "Barrett Innovation Solutions," Gabriel suggested immediately. "BIS would sound more prestigious on the stock exchange when you eventually go public." Solange and Eleanor exchanged amused glances at his precocious business sense. "That's exactly what I was considering," Solange admitted. "We're moving beyond water purification now. Our new energy conservation technology patents alone could revolutionize how buildings manage resources." After dinner, while the children showed Eleanor their latest school projects, Solange's phone rang. It was Martin Goldstein, now 80 years old but still sharp as ever. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "My office, tomorrow morning. Something important has come up." The following day, Martin pushed an unmarked envelope across his desk. This came through unofficial channels, an acquisition offer. Solange opened it carefully, her eyes widening at the figure. $100 million? For a company valued at half that? "Keep reading," Martin urged. As Solange scanned the document, her breath caught. Though disguised through layers of holding companies and investment firms, The trail led back to a familiar source. "Hale Enterprises," she whispered. "Victor wants to buy my company." Martin nodded gravely. "My contacts confirm it. He's been watching your expansion with growing concern. Barrett Technologies are starting to compete directly with Hale subsidiaries in key markets." A genuine laugh escaped Solange's lips, surprising even herself. "He's worried. After all this time, he finally recognizes who I've become." "What do you want to do?" Martin asked. 2 hours later, Solange stood before her company's board of directors. "Gentlemen, ladies, we've received an acquisition offer that we will be declining." She paced confidently as she continued, "Instead, I propose a counter-strategy. The Hale Group has a subsidiary, Clearwater Technologies, that's currently undervalued due to mismanagement. Their patents would complement our portfolio perfectly." "You want to acquire a Hale subsidiary?" asked a board member incredulously. "Precisely," Solange confirmed. "It's time we became the predator rather than the prey." That night, after the triplets were asleep, Solange pored over financial reports and technical assessments of various Hale Enterprises holdings. The company's overall performance remained strong, but several divisions showed signs of weakness, the result of Victor's tendency toward flashy acquisitions rather than solid operational management. "This one," she murmured, circling Clearwater Technologies in red ink. "Our entry point." 3 weeks later, Solange signed the final documents authorizing the purchase of Clearwater through a specially created holding company. To casual observers, the acquisition would appear as a simple business transaction. Only Solange, Martin, and a few trusted advisors understood its deeper significance. "Congratulations," Martin said as they clinked glasses of champagne in her office. "Your first step into Victor's territory. He won't even realize it's you until it's too late." The celebration dinner that evening at Eleanor's apartment was interrupted when the elderly woman began coughing violently during the toast, her face alarmingly pale. "Grandma?" Gabriel asked, his usual confidence faltering at the sight of Eleanor's distress. "Are you okay?" "Just a tickle," Eleanor insisted, though the handkerchief she pressed to her lips couldn't completely hide the flecks of blood. "Nothing to worry about, darlings." Later, after the children were occupied with dessert, Solange confronted Eleanor in the kitchen. "That wasn't nothing. Have you seen a doctor?" Eleanor sighed. "Age catches up with everyone eventually, my dear. Even stubborn old women like me." "Promise me you'll get checked," Solange insisted, suddenly terrified by the thought of losing the woman who had become her rock, her mentor, her family. That night, as she tucked the triplets into bed in their queen's apartment, Gabriel asked the question Solange had been dreading for years. "Mom, why has our father never tried to meet us? Doesn't he even wonder about us?" Solange sat on the edge of his bed, choosing her words carefully. "Your biological father made a choice not to be part of our lives. That was his decision, not ours. But why?" Sophia persisted from her own bed across the room. "What kind of person doesn't want to know their own children?" "Someone who couldn't see value in what was right in front of him," Solange answered honestly. "But that's his loss, not yours. Never yours." The following week, Solange hired a distinguished older woman named Margaret Winters, a former diplomat with impeccable social credentials, as her personal consultant on executive communication and etiquette. "I want to be flawless," Solange explained during their first session. "In every room, at every table, in every conversation. You're already remarkably accomplished," Margaret observed. "What's driving this desire for perfection?" Solange considered the question. "When you start with nothing, no connections, no privilege, no safety net, you can't afford mistakes. Every detail matters." Over the following months, Solange refined herself with the same methodical precision she applied to business strategies. She mastered the unwritten rules of New York's elite social circles, the subtle language of power expressed through everything from handshakes to seating arrangements, all while continuing to expand Barrett Innovation Solutions into new markets and technologies. When Innovative Business Today magazine requested an interview and cover shoot, Solange initially hesitated. Public exposure carried risks, especially with the triplets' privacy to consider. But Martin convinced her of the strategic benefits, and the resulting cover, Solange in a power suit against the Manhattan skyline, the headline proclaiming "The Future of Sustainable Innovation," marked her first significant public recognition. In her office, Solange placed the framed magazine cover on the wall opposite her desk. Beside it, in a simple black frame that drew no attention unless one looked closely, was the crumpled note Victor had left her years ago. For the Brazilian cleaning lady. Past and present, displayed side by side, a private reminder of how far she had come and who had underestimated her. The small subsidiary acquired from Hale Enterprises would be just the first piece of a meticulous acquisition plan that, in 7 years, would give Solange control of 28% of Hale Enterprises' shares, just in time for the encounter that fate was preparing at the Met Gala. The small subsidiary that had become Solange's first strategic acquisition now operated as a profitable division of Barrett Innovation Solutions, its former Hale Enterprises branding erased like footprints on a beach at high tide. 4 years had passed since that initial foray into Victor's territory, and the Barrett Innovation Solutions headquarters now dominated its own sleek tower in Midtown Manhattan, the company's value exceeding $300 million. Solange stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her executive suite, gazing at the city that had once seemed so hostile to a pregnant maid with nothing but determination. At 36, she had developed a presence that commanded instant respect. Her wardrobe exclusively designer pieces, her posture impeccable, her demeanor confident without arrogance. The frightened young woman who had once hidden her pregnancy beneath a loose uniform was unrecognizable in this polished CEO. The intercom on her desk chimed softly. "Ms. Barrett, your children are here." "Send them in, please," Solange replied, her face softening immediately. The doors opened to reveal the triplets, now 12 years old and developing into remarkable individuals. They wore the uniforms of their respective elite private schools, institutions they attended on merit scholarships, as Solange had insisted they earn their places rather than have them purchased. "Mom!" Sophia rushed forward, her backpack bulging with advanced textbooks. "Look what Professor Khatri sent over. New theoretical approaches to quantum computing that might revolutionize our water purification data models." Gabriel followed more sedately, his posture already mimicking that of the financial executives he admired. "The stock simulation I ran last weekend predicted today's market shift. 3 percentage points exactly as projected." Miguel entered last, his artistic soul evident in the way he paused to appreciate the light streaming through the windows. "I've been documenting the construction of the new solar array for the company archives," he said, pulling out his camera. "The contrast between the industrial components and the organic forms of the workers tells the real story of sustainable innovation." Solange embraced each of them, marveling at how their distinct personalities had developed. Sophia with her mathematical genius already tackling university-level problems, Gabriel with his uncanny financial instincts, Miguel seeing beauty and narrative where others saw only objects. "How was your day?" she asked, leading them to the comfortable seating area she had designed specifically for family visits. Before they could answer, her executive assistant appeared at the door, his expression unusually grave. "Ms. Barrett, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's breaking news you should see immediately." He activated the wall screen where a financial news network displayed the headline, "Hale Enterprises loses 200 million Japanese government contract." The reporter's voice filled the room. In a stunning development, Hale Enterprises' bid for the massive Tokyo Bay infrastructure project was rejected in favor of German competitor Vessertech. This marks the third major international contract loss for Hale this quarter. Market analysts are questioning CEO Victor Hale's leadership as shares dropped 12% in after-hours trading. Solange maintained a neutral expression as she watched Victor appear on screen, attempting to reassure investors with his characteristic confidence, though she could detect the strain beneath his polished veneer. "Mom?" Gabriel said quietly, his analytical mind already connecting dots. "Hale Enterprises is showing classic signs of corporate overextension. Their acquisition strategy has been aggressive but unfocused." "It's not our concern," Solange replied diplomatically, aware of the triplets' curiosity about the company that shared a last name with their grandmother. The family moment was interrupted by Solange's phone. Eleanor's name flashed on the screen. "Eleanor? Is everything?" Solange's question died as she heard the tremor in the housekeeper's voice on the other end. "Mrs. Hale has collapsed. The ambulance is taking her to Mount Sinai." 20 minutes later, Solange burst through the emergency room doors. The triplets closed behind her. She had cancelled every appointment, delegated urgent matters, and left instructions not to be disturbed except for absolute emergencies. Nothing mattered more than Eleanor. They found her in a private room, small and fragile against the hospital sheets but conscious. Medical equipment beeped steadily around her. "This is entirely unnecessary," Eleanor protested weakly as Solange approached. "Just a dizzy spell." The attending neurologist disagreed. "Mrs. Hale experienced a mild stroke. We've stabilized her condition, but she'll need to remain under observation." Over the next several hours, as tests were conducted and specialists consulted, the triplets remained steadfastly at Eleanor's bedside. Sophia read scientific journals aloud, Gabriel updated her on market movements, and Miguel sketched the skyline visible from her window, each connecting with their grandmother in their own way. When the children stepped out for dinner in the hospital cafeteria, Eleanor grasped Solange's hand with surprising strength. "There's something you need to know," she said, her voice low and urgent. "Victor has been maneuvering behind the scenes. He tried to have me declared mentally incompetent last month." Solange stared in shock. "What? Why would he—" "My shares," Eleanor answered grimly. "He's losing control of Hale Enterprises. The board is questioning his leadership. If he controlled my voting shares, he could silence the opposition." "That's despicable," Solange breathed, fury building within her. "Your own son trying to declare you incompetent for corporate control?" Eleanor's blue eyes, the same shade the triplets had inherited, flashed with determination. "I've spent too many years making excuses for his behavior. This was the final straw." Solange straightened, her protective instincts flaring. "I'll call Davis and Merchant right away. They're the best elder law attorneys in the city." The following morning, Solange met with a team of high-powered lawyers in an impromptu conference room at the hospital. Eleanor, looking stronger after a night of rest, sat upright in her adjustable bed. "We've reviewed the documentation," the lead attorney explained. "Mr. Hale attempted to file for conservatorship claiming cognitive decline, but the petition was incredibly weak. With current neurological assessments confirming Mrs. Hale's mental acuity, we can shut this down immediately." "Good," Solange nodded. "And I want protective measures in place to prevent any further attempts." Eleanor cleared her throat. "There's more I want to do." She looked directly at the attorney. "I want to transfer my shares in Hale Enterprises to a trust controlled by Solange." The room fell silent. Eleanor's shares represented approximately 12% of Hale Enterprises, a significant voting bloc. "Are you certain?" Solange asked quietly. "Absolutely," Eleanor replied without hesitation. "Victor has proven he cannot be trusted with his own legacy, let alone mine. You've demonstrated more integrity and business acumen than he ever has." 3 days later, still in her hospital room but sitting in an armchair dressed in her own silk robe, Eleanor signed the documents with a steady hand. The transfer was irrevocable. 12% of Hale Enterprises now under Solange's control. "Now you have real power over him," Eleanor said, a note of satisfaction in her voice. "Use it wisely." That evening, when Solange returned to her apartment with the triplets, they gathered in the living room with questions she had long anticipated. "Mom," Sophia began hesitantly, "why would that man, Victor, try to hurt Grandma Eleanor?" Solange took a deep breath. The moment had come for more of the truth. "Victor Hale is your biological father," she said quietly, watching their expressions shift from confusion to shock. "He chose not to be part of our lives when I told him I was pregnant with you." "He's our father?" Gabriel's voice cracked slightly, betraying his usual composure. "Biologically, yes," Solange confirmed, "but he's never acted as your father in any way that matters." Sophia's brilliant mind processed this revelation with characteristic precision. "So he's essentially just a genetic donor. You and Grandma Eleanor are our real family." Solange's heart swelled with love for these extraordinary children who could distill complex emotional truths with such clarity. "Exactly," she affirmed. "Family is about who loves you, who shows up, who builds a life with you, not just DNA." Miles away in the Hale building, Victor Hale paced his expansive office, his normally immaculate appearance showing signs of strain. His tie hung loosened around his neck, and a tumbler of scotch sat half-empty on his desk despite the early hour. His CFO stood nervously before him, clutching a tablet with the latest financial reports. "There's something else, sir. The ownership structure has shifted significantly." "What do you mean?" Victor demanded. "An investor now controls approximately 23% of outstanding shares. It appears to be a combination of market purchases through various entities and your mother's shares." Victor's hand froze midway to his scotch. "My mother sold her shares? To whom?" "That's the thing, sir. The beneficial owner is hidden behind several layers of trusts and holding companies. We can't identify them yet." Victor slammed his fist on the desk, sending papers flying. "Find out who it is! Nobody takes a quarter of my company without my knowledge or permission." As Victor ordered frantic investigations into the mysterious investor, he couldn't possibly imagine that the woman who had once swept the floors of his mansion now had sufficient power to sweep his name from the very company he had built. The revelation of Victor's attempt to seize control of his mother's assets sent ripples through Solange's carefully constructed world. 2 years after that hospital room confrontation, she sat in her expanded executive office, now occupying the entire top floor of the Barrett Innovation Solutions headquarters. At 38, Solange had refined her presence to art form, her posture regal, her designer wardrobe curated by personal stylists, her voice carrying the quiet authority that came from building a $450 million empire from nothing. Before her lay financial reports detailing the latest acquisition target, a small but innovative Hale Enterprises subsidiary specializing in renewable energy components. This would be her 7th strategic purchase from Victor's weakening corporate structure, bringing her total ownership stake to 28%. "The due diligence confirms what we suspected," her acquisition director explained. "They've undervalued the patents by at least 30%. Classic case of corporate neglect." Solange nodded. "Prepare the offer through Oceanic Holdings. The usual structure: maintain operational independence initially, rebrand gradually." Her phone chimed with a message from Eleanor, now 81 but still formidable despite her health challenges. "Have you considered the Met Board invitation?" The Metropolitan Museum of Art had extended an invitation for Solange to join its prestigious Board of Trustees, a position that typically went to old money families or cultural icons. Eleanor had quietly lobbied for Solange's inclusion, citing her philanthropic work in bringing clean water technologies to developing nations. "Victor sits on that board," Eleanor had reminded her when the invitation arrived. "Has for years. The two of you would eventually cross paths." The thought of a controlled encounter with Victor, on her terms, at the height of her success, had been percolating in Solange's mind for months. 14 years had passed since he had cast her out into the snow. 14 years of building, growing, and carefully acquiring pieces of his corporate empire through shell companies and investment vehicles he couldn't trace back to her. The intercom on her desk buzzed. "Ms. Barrett, the triplets have arrived from school." The door opened to reveal Gabriel, Sophia, and Miguel, now 14 years old and beginning to show the first signs of the adults they would become. Though they shared identical striking blue eyes, unmistakably Hale eyes, their personalities had diverged dramatically. "Harvard sent another recruitment package," Gabriel announced without preamble, dropping his backpack beside a modernist chair. At 14, he already carried himself with the confidence of someone twice his age, his school uniform impeccably maintained. "They're offering early admission at 16 if my next 2 semesters maintain current academic standards." Sophia rolled her eyes affectionately at her brother's formal delivery. "What Gabriel means is that Harvard is practically begging him to attend." She flopped onto the office sofa, her own uniform slightly rumpled, her backpack overflowing with advanced physics and mathematics textbooks. "Oh, and I got the notification about the International Mathematics Olympiad. I'm representing the United States again." Miguel, quieter than his siblings, set his camera carefully on the coffee table. "The gallery called," he said, his voice gentle but confident. "They want to include 3 of my East River documentary series in the Young Visionaries exhibition." Solange felt the familiar surge of fierce pride. Each triplet excelling in their own domain, Gabriel in business and strategy, Sophia in mathematics and science, Miguel in visual storytelling and human connection. They had flourished beyond her wildest dreams, their natural talents nurtured through opportunity rather than privilege. Later that evening, over dinner in their Upper West Side penthouse, a far cry from the tiny Bronx apartment of their early years, Solange's phone rang with Eleanor's distinctive chime. "I've been thinking about the Met Gala," Eleanor said without preamble. "They're announcing honorees for next year's event tomorrow. Your name is on the short list for your work bringing sustainable water systems to crisis regions." Solange nearly dropped her fork. "The Met Gala? That's precisely where you belong," Eleanor finished firmly. "And yes, Victor always attends. The Hale Group remains a major sponsor, despite their financial troubles." A weight settled in Solange's stomach, not fear but the gravity of inevitability. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that kind of confrontation." Eleanor's voice softened with rare vulnerability. "My dear, you've built an empire that rivals his. You've raised 3 extraordinary children without him. You've changed lives across 4 continents with your innovations. If anyone is ready, it's you." After ending the call, Solange found the triplets in the living room engaged in their evening rituals. Gabriel analyzing market reports, Sophia solving equations that covered multiple whiteboards, Miguel editing photographs on his specialized computer. "How would you feel about attending the Met Gala next year?" she asked casually. 3 heads turned simultaneously, expressions ranging from Gabriel's calculating interest to Miguel's artistic appreciation of the cultural significance. "The Metropolitan Museum of Art Gala," Sophia clarified, her brilliant mind immediately connecting dots. "What is the most prestigious social event in New York, where you'd potentially encounter Victor Hale?" Solange sometimes forgot how perceptive her children were, how their extraordinary intelligence extended beyond academic domains into emotional awareness. "Yes," she admitted. "There's a possibility I'll be named an honoree for the water purification work in North Africa." Gabriel set aside his tablet. "Statistically speaking, you would eventually cross paths with him at some point. A controlled environment with social constraints might be optimal for the initial encounter." "I could document it," Miguel suggested quietly. "Not the personal aspects, but your recognition. It's part of our family history." The following morning, the call came from the Met Museum's executive director himself. Solange would indeed be the humanitarian honoree for next year's gala, recognized for bringing sustainable technologies to regions most affected by climate change. Within hours, Her public relations team assembled in the conference room adjacent to her office, strategizing how to handle the inevitable media attention, not just around the honor itself, but the personal history that might resurface. "We should prepare for questions about your background," her PR director advised. "The from cleaning lady to CEO angle will be irresistible to the press." "And if information about your connection to the Hales emerges?" asked her chief of staff delicately. Solange considered this carefully. "We focus on the present and future. The Barrett Innovation Solutions story is about creation and solution building, not personal history. If pressed directly, we acknowledge past employment briefly and pivot to the work we're doing now." That afternoon, Solange stood in the private dressing room of Saint Laurent's Manhattan flagship, where the designer himself had sent preliminary sketches for her gala gown. The triplets sat on a velvet sofa, offering opinions as she considered options. "The midnight blue with structural elements," Gabriel suggested analytically. "It references both water and architectural innovation, subtle brand reinforcement." Sophia nodded agreement. "The asymmetrical shoulder detail creates mathematical interest while maintaining classical proportions." "It photographs beautifully from all angles," Miguel added, his artist's eye assessing how light would interact with the fabric. As Solange studied her reflection, a memory surfaced of another mirror in the staff bathroom of the Hale mansion, where she had once adjusted her maid's uniform with trembling hands, trying to conceal her pregnancy. The contrast between that terrified young woman and the confident CEO before her now was starker than any before and after transformation. 3 weeks later, Solange finalized the acquisition of 3 struggling Hale Enterprises subsidiaries, saving over 2,000 jobs in the process. The press release emphasized operational continuity and employment stability rather than the changing ownership structure. "We're not pursuing these acquisitions for vengeance," she explained to her board. "These companies have valuable technologies and dedicated workforces being squandered under current management. We can integrate their innovations while preserving their operational strengths." That night, Solange scheduled a session with Dr. Levine, the therapist she had been seeing discreetly for years. Though her outward success was undeniable, she remained committed to maintaining her emotional health, particularly with the impending Hale encounter looming. "I've spent 14 years building something meaningful," she explained, seated in the comfortable leather chair of Dr. Levine's office. "This isn't about him anymore. It's about showing myself how completely I've moved beyond that moment of absolute vulnerability." Dr. Levine nodded thoughtfully. "The circle completes itself. You're returning not as the person who was rejected, but as someone who has transcended that rejection entirely." Later, standing at the window of her penthouse while the triplets slept, Solange gazed at the Manhattan skyline, the concrete manifestation of ambition and possibility that had once seemed so unattainable. Somewhere out there was Victor Hale, likely in his office trying to salvage the remnants of his crumbling empire, unaware that in a few months their paths would finally cross again. "I'm ready to close this chapter," she whispered to the glittering city below. As she prepared her speech for the Met Gala, Solange couldn't predict that the confrontation with Victor would be far more public and explosive than she had planned, nor that the media would transform their reunion into the most talked-about comeback story of the year. While preparing her speech for the Met Gala, Solange couldn't have predicted just how public and explosive her confrontation with Victor would be. Now, the night had finally arrived. The May evening wrapped Manhattan in a perfect spring warmth as Solange stood in her penthouse living room, studying her reflection in the full-length mirror. The midnight blue Saint Laurent gown hugged her figure before cascading to the floor in architectural waves that caught the light with each movement. 15 years had transformed the frightened maid into this confident woman whose name appeared on Fortune's most influential list. "You look like a goddess, Mom," Miguel said, adjusting his camera to capture her from different angles. At 15, he already showed the eye of a master photographer, documenting what he called our family's historic moments. Gabriel and Sophia entered the room, both stunning in their formal attire. Though they were teenagers, their poise and confidence made them appear older. Gabriel's custom tuxedo fit his tall frame perfectly, while Sophia had opted for an elegant pantsuit that complemented her analytical personality. "The car service just called," Gabriel announced, checking his watch. "They'll be here in 7 minutes. We should prepare for approximately 27 press outlets on the red carpet, based on last year's attendance patterns." Sophia rolled her eyes affectionately. "Only you would calculate the exact number of photographers, Gabriel." She turned to Solange. "Are you nervous about seeing him?" Solange adjusted an earring, a simple but flawless diamond that caught the light. "Not nervous, just ready. It's been 15 years. I'm not the same person he threw away." The limousine glided through Manhattan traffic, its tinted windows shielding the Barrett family from curious onlookers. As they approached the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the iconic steps came into view, illuminated and lined with the red carpet where celebrities, business moguls, and socialites posed for photographers. "Remember," Solange told the triplets as the car slowed, "this is about celebrating the water purification project that's bringing clean water to 17 countries. Whatever happens with Victor Hale is secondary." The moment their limousine door opened, camera flashes erupted like a lightning storm. The Barrett family's arrival created an immediate stir, photographers and reporters abandoning other celebrities to capture the humanitarian honoree and her remarkable children. "Ms. Barrett, this way, please!" called dozens of voices as Solange emerged, the Saint Laurent creation moving like water around her. "Could we get a shot with your children?" shouted another. Solange navigated the red carpet with practiced ease, answering questions with gracious precision while keeping the triplets close. The teenagers handled the attention with surprising maturity, having been prepared for public appearances since their academic and artistic achievements had begun drawing notice. "Ms. Barrett, your water purification systems have revolutionized access in drought-affected regions. What's next for Barrett Innovation Solutions?" asked a reporter from Forbes. "We're expanding our focus to include urban water reclamation," Solange replied smoothly. "Cities waste millions of gallons daily that could be repurposed with the right infrastructure." 4 limousines away, Victor Hale descended onto the red carpet with his third wife, Alessandra, a former model 20 years his junior. At 53, Victor still cut an impressive figure in his tuxedo, though stress had carved deep lines around his eyes and prematurely grayed his temples. The financial press had been merciless about Hale Enterprises' recent stumbles, and his usual confident stride now seemed forced. "Mr. Hale, any comment on rumors that Hale Enterprises will seek bankruptcy protection next quarter?" called out a financial reporter. Victor's smile remained fixed as he replied, "Completely unfounded rumors. Hale Enterprises is stronger than ever, with strategic restructuring underway." As he moved forward, Victor noticed an unusual commotion near the museum entrance. Photographers were abandoning established celebrities, creating a bottleneck of attention around a specific arrival. "Who's causing all that fuss?" Alessandra asked, checking her phone for the guest list. "Solange Barrett," she answered herself, scrolling through information. "Chief Executive Officer of Barrett Innovation Solutions, just announced as a new board member for the Met. They say she's the most successful entrepreneur of the decade." Victor froze mid-step, the name hitting him like a physical blow. It couldn't be the same woman, and yet... He turned slowly toward the commotion, his eyes narrowing to see through the forest of cameras and reporters. And then, as the crowd parted momentarily, he saw her. Solange stood at the center of the attention, radiating confidence and elegance as she answered questions with a warm smile. Beside her were 3 teenagers, striking, poised young people who shared an unmistakable resemblance to each other and to... Victor felt the blood drain from his face. "Victor? Are you all right?" Alessandra touched his arm, concerned by his sudden pallor. Before he could respond, a reporter's question cut through the ambient noise, clearly audible in the momentary lull. "Ms. Barrett, Could you comment on Barrett Innovation Solutions' recent acquisition of 3 Hale Enterprises subsidiaries, which effectively saved the company from imminent bankruptcy? Victor's heart hammered against his ribs as Solange responded with diplomatic precision. I believe companies with solid technologies deserve second chances, even when poorly managed, she stated with practiced grace. Barrett Innovation Solutions saw potential in the patents and technical teams. As for the rest of Hale Enterprises, well, that depends on its CEO's decisions. Laughter rippled through the press corps while Victor remained frozen, his eyes locked on the 3 teenagers. The resemblance was undeniable, the same Hale blue eyes that had marked his family for generations, the same facial structure he saw in his mirror every morning. "Victor? You've gone completely white," Alessandra whispered urgently. "What's wrong?" Before he could formulate a response, a familiar voice spoke from behind him. "Son, how lovely to see you here." Eleanor Hale stood supported by an elegant cane but still commanding in her Chanel evening dress, her 83 years doing little to diminish her regal bearing. "Mother? What are you doing here? I thought you said you were too tired for social events this year." "And Miss Solange's night?" "Impossible," Eleanor replied, her gaze drifting meaningfully toward the triplets. "My grandchildren look absolutely stunning, don't you think?" Understanding crashed over Victor like a tidal wave. You knew? All this time?" "From the very beginning," Eleanor confirmed, no remorse in her voice. "I was the one who helped Solange when you threw her into the street. I was the one who held Gabriel, Sophia, and Miguel when they were born. I was the one who watched her empire grow while yours crumbled." The grand hall of the Metropolitan Museum was packed with celebrities and magnates when Victor finally managed to enter, his legs moving automatically while his mind struggled to process the revelation. His eyes immediately sought Solange, finding her surrounded by tech CEOs and influential politicians. As if sensing his gaze, Solange turned slowly. Their eyes met across the crowded room. For a moment, no one else existed in the space. She showed no surprise, no anger, no perceptible emotion whatsoever. Just a slight acknowledgement, as if spotting a distant acquaintance of little importance. This detachment was more devastating to Victor than any display of hatred would have been. Unable to control his impulses, Victor crossed the room toward her. As he approached, he noticed the details that years had added, the confident posture, the natural elegance, the gleam of pure triumph in her eyes. "Solange," he managed when he finally stood before her. "It's been a long time." "Mr. Hale," she responded formally, as if he were any stranger. "I hope you're enjoying the event." You look different," he stammered, losing his composure. 15 years will do that to people," Solange replied with a polite smile. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to speak with the Secretary of State about our clean water program." When she turned to leave, Victor grabbed her arm, an instinctive gesture that immediately drew disapproving glances. "The triplets," he whispered urgently. "They're my children, aren't they?" Solange delicately removed his hand from her arm. "They're my children, Mr. Hale. You made that quite clear when you expelled me from your house." At that moment, the 3 teenagers approached, curious about the man who seemed to be disturbing their mother. "Is everything all right here?" asked Gabriel, the tallest of the 3, positioning himself protectively beside Solange. Victor stared at the young people, seeing his own image reflected in them. I am... Children, this is Victor Hale, CEO of Hale Enterprises," Solange introduced with studied calm. "Mr. Hale, these are my children, Gabriel, Sophia, and Miguel Barrett." The curious gazes of the triplets studied him like scientists analyzing a rare specimen. There was no recognition in their eyes, only polite curiosity. "Pleasure to meet you, sir," said Sophia, extending her hand professionally. "I've read about your company recently. Difficult situation. Especially considering our mother now controls 28% of Hale Enterprises shares." Gabriel added with the brutal frankness typical of adolescence. Technically, she's your boss now. Victor staggered as if he'd received a physical blow. What? Strategic acquisitions over 10 years, Solange explained calmly. Your board was quite willing to sell to anonymous investors while you were busy buying yachts and houses in Aspen. The realization of the complete power inversion between them crushed Victor. The woman he had dismissed as replaceable now controlled his financial destiny. Why? He finally managed to ask. Revenge? Solange smiled genuinely for the first time. Business, Mr. Hale, just business. Now, if you'll excuse us, the governor is waiting to discuss implementing our purification system in public schools. As Solange walked away with the triplets, Eleanor approached her paralyzed son. They're extraordinary, aren't they? The matriarch commented. Gabriel has already been accepted to Harvard at 15. Sophia has won the International Mathematics Olympiad 3 consecutive times. And Miguel? A prodigy in visual arts whose photographs have been exhibited at the Tate Gallery in London. Why did you never tell me? Victor finally asked, his voice breaking. You told her she was replaceable, Eleanor replied coldly. That they were worthless bastards, that they should go back to the hole they came from. Why would I tell a man like that about 3 brilliant children? While the Met Gala evening ended with growing whispers and curious glances, Solange couldn't have predicted that the following morning would bring headlines that would make her private story a national phenomenon, forcing Victor into a public exposure that his declining empire could not withstand. Eleanor's words hung in the air like an indictment as she walked away, leaving Victor standing alone amidst the glittering crowd, his face ashen with the weight of revelation. The rest of the gala passed in a blur for him. Meaningless conversations, mechanical smiles, a growing sense of dread as he watched Solange from across the room, commanding attention effortlessly while the triplets, his children, moved through the elite crowd with the ease of those who belonged there by merit, not inheritance. Dawn broke over Manhattan with merciless clarity, sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Victor's penthouse. He had barely slept, his mind racing with implications and revelations. The television flickered to life with his morning news routine, but the words that greeted him sent a fresh wave of panic through his body. Breaking news. CEO of Barrett Innovation Solutions revealed as former housekeeper of Victor Hale. The anchor's perfectly composed face filled the screen. In a stunning revelation following last night's Met Gala, sources confirm that Solange Barrett, the engineering genius behind Barrett Innovation Solutions' $350 million empire, once worked as a domestic employee for Hale Enterprises CEO Victor Hale. More shocking still are claims that Barrett's 15-year-old triplets are Hale's unacknowledged children. Victor fumbled for the remote, changing channels frantically only to find the story everywhere. From cleaning lady to CEO, the Solange Barrett story. Solange Barrett controls 28% of Hale Enterprises, the maid who became the boss. Triplet prodigies revealed as unrecognized Hale heirs, confirms Eleanor Hale. The last headline made his blood run cold. Grabbing his phone, Victor saw dozens of missed calls, from his PR team, board members, his lawyer. 3 text messages from Alessandra simply read, "Is this true?" Followed by, "I can't believe this," and finally, "My lawyer will contact yours." His phone rang again, his chief communications officer. "Sir, we need a statement immediately. The press is swarming the building." Victor moved to the window. Sure enough, news vans lined the street below. "How bad is it?" "The market opens in 20 minutes. Analysts are predicting a significant drop. Your mother's interview is playing on every network." "My mother's what?" Victor nearly dropped the phone. "She gave an exclusive to NBC this morning. It's not good, sir." Scrambling for the remote again, Victor switched to NBC where Eleanor Hale sat composed in her Upper East Side apartment, her posture regal despite her age. "Yes, I helped Solange when my son expelled her from our home," Eleanor was saying, her voice steady. She was 5 months pregnant with triplets, his children, and he refused to acknowledge his responsibility. I've spent 15 years watching these extraordinary young people grow up without their father, and it has always broken my heart. The interviewer leaned forward. Mrs. Hale, to clarify, Victor Hale knew Ms. Barrett was pregnant with his children when he terminated her employment? He did, Eleanor confirmed. He offered her money to solve the problem and returned to Brazil. When she refused, he had security escort her out. It was December, snowing heavily. She had nowhere to go. Victor collapsed onto his sofa, watching his carefully constructed public image disintegrate in real time. His phone buzzed continuously, board members demanding emergency meetings, partners seeking to distance themselves, journalists requesting comments. At Barrett Innovation Solutions headquarters, Solange convened an emergency meeting with her PR team. Dressed in a tailored navy suit that projected calm authority, she maintained her composure despite the circus unfolding around her. "We maintain dignity at all costs," she instructed. "No direct attacks on Victor Hale or Hale Enterprises. Focus on our journey, our innovations, our impact. This is not a revenge story. It's about perseverance and building something meaningful." Her chief of communications nodded, taking notes. "The media is requesting interviews, especially with the triplets." "Absolutely not," Solange stated firmly. "They are minors. Their privacy is non-negotiable." Despite her protective measures, the triplets faced a barrage of questions upon arriving at school. Reporters had gathered outside the prestigious private institutions they attended, shouting questions as security escorted them inside. "How does it feel to learn your father rejected you before birth? Did you know Victor Hale was your father before last night? Will you be changing your last name to Hale now?" Gabriel, ever the leader, shepherded his siblings through the chaos with remarkable poise for a 15-year-old. "No comment," he repeated firmly, his arm protectively around Sophia's shoulders while Miguel walked slightly behind, documenting the frenzy with his ever-present camera. By midday, the financial impact became clear. Hale Enterprises shares plummeted 15% within hours of the market opening. Analysts cited leadership integrity concerns and governance questions in their downgrades. Meanwhile, Barrett Innovation Solutions stock surged 22%, with market commentators noting the poetic justice of the situation. Victor's third wife, Alessandra, wasted no time protecting her interests. By 3 o'clock, her publicist had released a statement to People magazine. Alessandra is deeply shocked by these revelations and has filed for immediate divorce. She had no knowledge of Mr. Hale's past actions and cannot in good conscience remain married to someone capable of such cruelty toward a pregnant woman and his own children. The Hale Enterprises boardroom resembled a war room by late afternoon. Legal advisors, PR consultants, and senior executives huddled around the massive table while Victor paced at the head, his tailored suit now rumpled, his hair disheveled from repeatedly running his hands through it. "The immediate concern is market stabilization," the CFO explained grimly. "We've lost nearly $400 million in market cap today alone." "What about Barrett?" Victor demanded. "Can we leverage her ownership position against her somehow? Force a divestiture based on conflict of interest?" The lead counsel shook his head. "Her acquisitions were all legal, conducted through different entities over years. If anything, her position gives her significant influence over our operations now." That evening, in a desperate attempt to salvage some connection to the children he had rejected, Victor sent carefully worded messages through Eleanor, requesting to meet the triplets. The response came swiftly from Gabriel's personal email, its formal tone belying his youth. "Mr. Hale, while we acknowledge your biological connection to us, we are not currently interested in establishing a personal relationship. Our focus remains on our education and personal development. Should this position change, we will contact you through appropriate channels. Respectfully, Gabriel, Sophia, and Miguel Barrett." The rejection, though politely phrased, struck Victor with unexpected force. These children, his children, wanted nothing to do with him, children who, by all accounts, were extraordinary in every measurable way. Meanwhile, Solange granted a single interview to PBS, choosing the most serious and least sensationalistic outlet. Seated in a comfortable chair in her office, family photos visible but not prominently displayed, she projected calm strength. "Yes, I worked as a housekeeper for the Hale family," she acknowledged when asked directly. "That experience was one chapter in a much longer story. I'm proud of the journey that brought me here, not despite the challenges, but because of how they shaped my perspective on creating solutions that help people in genuine need." When the interviewer attempted to steer toward the personal drama, Solange redirected skillfully. "My children are my greatest accomplishment. They are remarkable young people with their own dreams and talents. They deserve privacy as they navigate their teenage years, not public scrutiny about circumstances beyond their control." In the marble-floored courthouse of Manhattan, another scene in the unfolding drama played out 3 days after the Met Gala. Eleanor Hale, supported by a team of prestigious attorneys, filed formal legal proceedings to have the triplets recognized as legitimate Hale heirs and included in the family trust. "My client simply wishes to ensure her biological grandchildren have access to their rightful family legacy," her lawyer stated to the press afterward. "DNA testing has already confirmed paternity with 99.9998% certainty." Victor, ambushed by reporters as he left the preliminary hearing, struggled to maintain composure as microphones thrust toward his face. "Mr. Hale, did you deny your own children? Did you call a pregnant immigrant worthless?" "No comment at this time," he managed, hurrying toward his waiting car as flashbulbs exploded around him. Later that evening, financial publications released another bombshell. Barrett Innovation Solutions controls 28% of Hale Enterprises, making former employee effectively her ex-employer's boss. The article detailed how Solange had methodically acquired shares through various entities over a decade, culminating in Eleanor's significant transfer. Market analysts speculated about a potential takeover, while corporate governance experts debated the unprecedented nature of the situation. While the media storm intensified, no one could predict that in just 1 week, Victor Hale would find himself in a boardroom for the first time in his life, needing Solange Barrett's approval to maintain nominal control of the company that bore his own name. As Solange's position as the effective controller of 28% of Hale Enterprises' shares became public knowledge, the financial news outlets transformed her story into something approaching modern mythology. The abandoned maid who had returned as the conqueror, the rejected immigrant who now held power over the man who had cast her aside. It was too perfect a narrative for the media to resist. 3 weeks after the Met Gala, Victor sat alone in his office, staring at newspaper headlines spread across his desk. The most damning came from the Wall Street Journal. Hale Enterprises faces imminent collapse. 2,000 jobs at risk as board considers bankruptcy. Protection. His empire, built over decades, was crumbling beneath him. Not just because of the scandal, though that had accelerated the decline, but because of years of poor decisions, vanity acquisitions, and neglected innovation. The truth he couldn't escape was that Solange Barrett had been building while he had been coasting on legacy and reputation. The intercom buzzed, interrupting his dark thoughts. "Sir, the board is assembled in the main conference room. They're requesting your immediate presence." Victor straightened his tie, brushed invisible lint from his bespoke suit, and attempted to summon the commanding presence that had once come so naturally. When he entered the boardroom, the silence that greeted him was worse than any accusation. 12 faces turned toward him, expressions ranging from open hostility to grim resignation. Warren Blackwell, the lead independent director, spoke first. "Victor, the situation is untenable. Our stock has declined 63% in 3 weeks. Major clients are terminating contracts. The banks are calling in loans." "We'll weather this," Victor insisted, his voice lacking its usual conviction. "The Barrett situation is temporary. This isn't about Barrett. interrupted Diane Chen, another director. At least, not entirely. This is about years of declining innovation, excessive executive compensation, and strategic missteps. The scandal merely exposed what was already failing. Warren slid a document across the polished table. The board has voted. You have two options: work directly with Solange Barrett to restructure the company, or face a vote of no confidence. Victor stared at the paper, blood rushing in his ears. You want me to partner with her? The woman who's been systematically acquiring pieces of my company? The woman who saved 3 of our subsidiaries from collapse, Diane corrected sharply. The woman who retained all staff when she acquired those divisions. The woman whose company's stock has increased 40% while ours has plummeted. This is blackmail, Victor protested weakly. Warren's expression hardened. This is business, Victor. Something you used to understand. 2 days later, Victor found himself in a situation he could never have imagined, waiting in a conference room at Barrett Innovation Solutions headquarters. The sleek, modern building stood just 4 blocks from the aging Hale building, its gleaming facade and architectural embodiment of innovation contrasted with fading legacy. When Solange entered, flanked by her legal team and chief operating officer, Victor was struck again by the completeness of her transformation. She wore a tailored Armani suit that suggested power without ostentation, her posture erect but not rigid, her expression professional rather than triumphant. "Mr. Hale," she greeted him with a slight nod. "Shall we begin?" For the next 3 hours, they reviewed financial projections, organizational restructuring plans, and strategic pivots. Despite himself, Victor found himself impressed by the clarity of her analysis and the pragmatic solutions she proposed. This was not revenge. This was strategic business thinking of the highest order. "Your board has approved our basic framework," Solange explained, gesturing to a slide displaying the proposed corporate structure. The Hale Barrett Corporation would maintain both companies' core strengths while eliminating redundancies. I would serve as chairperson of the board, while you would remain CEO, reporting to a restructured board with equal representation from both companies. Victor studied the proposal, understanding the subtext perfectly. He would maintain his title and public role, but his power would be circumscribed, his decisions subject to oversight. "And if I refuse?" Solange met his gaze directly. "Then Barrett Innovation Solutions will divest its Hale Enterprises holdings gradually over 24 months, likely triggering the complete collapse of your company. Approximately 2,000 families would lose their income and health insurance. I'd prefer to avoid that outcome." "Why?" The question escaped before he could contain it. "Why help save what's left rather than watch it burn? After what I did to you, most would call that justice." Something flickered in Solange's eyes. Not pity, but a kind of distant compassion. "This isn't about you or me anymore. It's about thousands of employees who depend on these companies for their livelihoods. It's about technologies that, properly managed, could genuinely improve lives." She paused. "Justice isn't destruction, Mr. Hale. It's restoration of balance." That evening, when Solange returned to her penthouse, she found the triplets waiting with unconcealed curiosity. "How did it go with him?" Sophia asked immediately, looking up from complex equations spread across the dining table. Solange set down her briefcase with a sigh. "We've reached a preliminary agreement for corporate restructuring. The details will take weeks to finalize." Gabriel, ever pragmatic, nodded approvingly. "Smart move. Preservation of assets while establishing clear governance control." "But why help him at all?" Miguel asked quietly, his artistic soul more attuned to emotional currents than his siblings. "After everything he did?" Solange sat beside them, considering her answer carefully. "Because this decision affects thousands of families. It's not about him or about me." Sophia's brilliant mind processed this with characteristic efficiency. Logical. The optimal outcome preserves jobs while establishing appropriate accountability. Yet even as her children accepted her explanation, Solange recognized a deeper truth she hadn't articulated. Saving what remained of Hale Enterprises wasn't mercy. It was the final proof that she had transcended the trauma completely. Revenge would have kept her tethered to the past. Reconstruction allowed her to shape the future. The following week, Victor faced another unfamiliar scenario, meeting the triplets in a neutral setting. They had agreed to a lunch at a midtown restaurant, a public place where the teenagers would feel secure and in control. When they arrived, Victor was already seated, nervously adjusting his silverware. The sight of all three entering together, confident, poised, unmistakably carrying his genetic heritage in their features, sent a surge of complex emotions through him. Pride, regret, wonder, shame, all tangled together in a knot he couldn't unravel. "Mr. Hale," Gabriel greeted him formally, extending a hand. "Thank you for respecting our conditions for this meeting." "Of course," Victor replied, shaking the offered hand and marveling at the firmness of the 15-year-old's grip. "I appreciate you agreeing to meet at all." As they settled into their seats, an awkward silence descended. Sophia broke it with characteristic directness. "Let's establish parameters," she stated, her blue eyes, his eyes, evaluating him clinically. "We are meeting you because we're curious from a genetic perspective. I'm particularly interested in understanding which traits we inherited from which side. And don't expect us to call you father," Gabriel added, his tone matter-of-fact rather than accusatory. "That title needs to be earned, not granted by biology." Victor nodded, accepting these terms as the reasonable boundaries they were. "I understand. I have no right to expect anything from you." Miguel, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "I have one question. Did you ever wonder about us? Even once, in 15 years? The simplicity of the question pierced Victor's practiced composure. "I convinced myself you didn't exist," he admitted, the truth painful but necessary. "It was easier than acknowledging what I'd done." The lunch continued with careful conversation, the triplets sharing selected facts about their achievements and interests while maintaining emotional distance. Victor listened, increasingly aware of the extraordinary young people he had missed watching grow up, and of the remarkable job Solange had done raising them alone. 1 month later, in the grand boardroom of the newly formed Hale Barrett Corporation, Solange presided over her first meeting as chairperson. Executives from both companies sat around the massive table, the tension palpable as two corporate cultures began their delicate integration. Victor, seated to her right as CEO, watched her command the room with natural authority. She outlined the restructuring plan with clarity and confidence, addressing concerns directly and setting ambitious but achievable targets. "Our companies have different histories but complementary strengths," she concluded. "Together, we can build something more resilient and innovative than either could achieve alone." As the meeting adjourned and executives filed out, Victor remained seated, studying the woman who had once cleaned his home and now controlled his professional fate. "You're good at this," he acknowledged quietly when they were alone. "Better than I ever was." Solange gathered her papers without rushing. "I had to be. I didn't have the luxury of failure." 1 year later, the Hale Barrett Corporation received the Global Innovation Award for Sustainable Technology Integration. At the ceremony, Solange stood at the podium accepting the honor while Victor applauded from the audience. The triplets, now 16 and increasingly comfortable with their complicated family history, sat beside Eleanor, who beamed with pride despite her frailty. Later that evening, they gathered for a family dinner at Eleanor's apartment, a tradition that had gradually evolved over the preceding months. When the doorbell rang, Sophia answered to find Victor standing awkwardly with a small gift bag. "You're late," she noted, but stepped aside to let him enter. Victor moved cautiously into the dining room, still not fully integrated into this family unit but no longer completely excluded. As he observed Solange laughing with the children and Eleanor, he finally understood the deepest truth. The real justice hadn't come through Solange's revenge. but through her capacity to move forward and build something extraordinary that never needed him to exist. And that realization was more transformative than any punishment could have been. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.